Hi everyone. We are going to spend the next 2 days in math class reviewing some of the things that you worked on last week. It's important that we slow down and take time to review because you will not be successful with our next step until these steps have been mastered. So what is our goal today? Today we are focusing on being able to look at an amount and write that amount as both a fraction and a decimal. So I'm going to be asking you to grab the following materials. You will need a pencil, scrap paper, that can be any kind of paper, you just need something to work on, and your math book. Go ahead and hit the pause button on this video and go grab those materials. When you have them all ready to go, then hit play and we'll continue. Now that you have your materials, we're going to work on your scrap paper and practice a couple situations together. I would like you to, again, use the pause button throughout the next part of this video. So we're going to look at these pictures, and I'm going to ask you to write what you see as both a fraction and a decimal. The best way to do this is to try it on your own first by hitting the pause button, writing your answer on your scrap paper, and then when you think you've got it, hit play, and you'll be able to see if you are correct. So take a look here at this first image. Notice what the box has been divided into. So remember, when we're working with decimals, we're thinking about tenths and hundredths. So study, is it tenths or hundredths? And when you're ready, go ahead and hit the pause button. Try to write what you see as a fraction and then as a decimal. Okay, so let's see how you did. Looking at this image, I notice it's divided into 10 equal pieces or tenths. So if I'm writing that as a fraction, my denominator is 10. Of those 10 pieces, 6 of them are colored. So my fraction is 6/10. If I were to write that as a decimal, here's what it would look like. There are no whole pieces. So in the ones place or the whole number side, we put a 0. In the tenths place, we put a 6. If you have both of those as your answer, you are correct. However, there are also 2 other possible answers, and this is why we're taking time to practice this today. 6/10 can also represent hundredths. So if you think about this, you know in each one of these tenths, there's 10 little individual things, which I'm trying to draw with dots and it's not really working. So think about it this way. That's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. So not only is this 6/10, this also represents 60 hundredths. They both would represent the same amount. So we could also write 60 hundredths as a decimal. Here's what it would look like. No holes, decimal point, 6 in the tenths place, 0 in the hundredths place. So you would read this first group as 6/10. You would read the second group as 60 hundredths. Okay, take a look at the picture on the next side. Go ahead, hit the pause button. Okay, hopefully you paused and tried to write this as a fraction as a decimal. Let's see how you did. The first thing you'll notice is that it is divided into hundredths, so the bottom of your fraction should represent 100 little pieces. Of those 100, let's count how many. The easiest way to do that is to count by tens first. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 75 out of 100 colored green. The way we would write that as a decimal is like this. There are 0 whole things colored, and then there's 75 hundredths. Now, in this situation, we cannot write this in tenths because we would then not be including these 5. So because these 5 are there, we cannot write this also as tenths. We can only write it as hundredths. All right, let's keep going and let's try 2 more. Take a look at this next image. When you're ready, hit the pause button and try to write what you see as both a fraction and a decimal. All right, let's check in and see how you did. Notice the box is divided into 100 little pieces. So we're going to write our fraction as hundredths. And Of those 100, we have just 4. So 4 out of 100 or 4 hundredths. To rate it as a decimal, we do not have a whole entire block shaded. So we put 0 in the ones place. There are no full groups of 10. We don't have any full columns colored in, so we're putting a 0 in the tenths place. And then 4 little hundredths, 4 in the hundredth place. In this situation, again, we cannot write this as tenths because we do not have a full column of tenths filled in. All right, one more. Go ahead, take a look at this image over here. When you're ready, pause the video, try to write it as a fraction and a decimal. All right, let's see how you did. Notice right away it's divided into hundredths. So we start with 100 as the denominator of our fraction. Count the groups of 10. So we have 10, 20, 30. And then you'll notice almost the entire row is filled in but 1. So if the entire row is filled in but 1, I know 10 take away 1 is 9. So I see 10, 20, 30, 39 out of 100. So that's how we would write it as a fraction. As a decimal, it would look like this. No whole diagrams are colored, so we put a 0 in the ones place. And then we have 39. Now here's what I want you to notice. Here's your 3 groups of 10, 1, 2, 3, and then your 9 other hundredths right there. All right, if you did okay with those, then let's keep going and we're going to try some other things. Okay, so now continuing on your scrap paper, we're going to take these to another level. What's different about this situation is all of these situations can be written as both tenths and hundredths. So I'm going to ask you to write decimals in tenths and hundredths and fractions in tenths and hundredths. Again, when you're ready to try it, hit pause, record your answers, then when you're ready, hit play to see if you were correct. So take a look at the first diagram. When you're ready to try it, hit pause, write your answers, and then when you're ready to check your work, hit play. All right, so let's see how you did. If you look at the diagram, you'll notice it's divided into tenths. So I start right away by writing the fraction with tenths. And if you count the tenths, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. So 5 tenths. To write that as a decimal, no whole diagrams are colored. 5 in the tenths place. We could also turn this into hundredths. So think about it this way. This is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So this could also be 50 hundredths. Now you may be noticing a little trick here. If you look, let me change colors. If you look, all we're doing is adding a 0 to the numerator and a 0 to the denominator. So maybe you kind of notice that pattern. All right, so let's keep going. So we know that this situation is also 50 hundredths. To write that as a decimal, we put a 0 in the ones place because we do not have one whole diagram colored. We still have a 5 in the tenths place, but to turn it into hundredths, we just put the 0 in the hundredths place. And now we have 50 hundredths. So 5 tenths and 50 hundredths. How'd you do? All right, take a look at the next one. When you're ready, hit pause and give it a try. All right, let's take a look. This time, the diagram's divided into hundredths, so I'm going to start with that. And I see 10, 20, 30. To write that as a decimal, no whole diagrams are colored. And I have 30 hundredths. We could turn this into tenths because if you look, I see 3 whole tenths. Writing that as a decimal would just look like that. Again, notice hundredths has extra zeros, tenths is missing the 0. So I'm hoping you see how you can flip-flop back and forth from these pretty easily. All right, one more set that I want you to practice. Now we're going to add in some mixed numbers. So now we're getting really challenging. Same thing, write these using both tenths and hundredths, both decimals and fractions. All right, so let's see how you did with the first one. Notice you have 2 whole full diagrams colored in. So if we're doing a fraction, it's actually going to be a mixed number. We have 2 wholes. Look now at this third one, and you'll see it's divided into hundredths. So let's see, out of those hundredths, I see 40 of them colored in. So we have 2 and 40 hundredths. To write that as a decimal, here's what it would look like. You would put a 2 in the ones place because we have 2 whole diagrams. You would put 4, 0 to get your 40 hundredths. So you would read this as 2 and 40 hundredths. To write it in tenths, you would still keep the whole number of 2, but instead of 40 hundredths, it becomes 4 tenths. In your decimal, you still keep the 2 as the whole number, and you just put the 4 in the tens place. Notice how it just looks like some zeros went away. All right, one more to try. Take a look at this one, see how it goes. All right, let's see how you did. Notice again, you have 2 full diagrams colored in, so we're going to start with a whole number of 2. This time the diagrams are colored in using tenths, so we're going to put a 10 in our denominator. And if you count them, you'll see that there are 5 tenths colored in. Here's how you would write that as a decimal, 2 and 5 tenths. Try writing it now with hundredths. Keep your whole number as a 2. Make your denominator 100. If you think about that, you have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 hundredths. 2 and 50 hundredths. So, some final practice for you today. Go back into your math book and find the homework page from lesson 12-1. I'm going to ask you to do some work on this homework page. In this homework page, the first thing that I want you to notice is the directions for some of the tasks. So you're going to be completing numbers 1 through 3. Notice it says write a decimal and a fraction for each grid. Make sure you do that. If you want to really push yourself, some of these you might be able to write as both tenths and hundredths like we just practiced. When you get down to numbers 4 through 7, it says shade the grid for each fraction. So you're going to look at the fraction and color what that would look like. But then don't forget the second step. You have to go back and write the decimal that would go with it. On the back side of the page, you're going to complete number 9. Number 9 is a question relating to what we just talked about, how 70 hundredths and 7 tenths can represent the same amount. Hint, hint. So take a look at that one. And then you're going to continue scrolling all the way down to numbers 12 and number 13. So good luck. Use the skills that we did when we were just practicing.